After the crushing defeat at the annual pumpkin contest, Moria retreated to her cold, dark cottage, her mind swirling with new ideas. Failure had gnawed at her once more, but this time, something different happened. During the market, she had made some small sales, and villagers had bought a few of her pumpkins. It wasn't much, but for the first time, someone in the village had willingly chosen her pumpkins. The thought planted a seed of determination within her. It was a small victory, but in Moria's mind, it was the start of something far greater. She wasn't just an ordinary witch anymore. She would elevate and become the pumpkin witch, and the village would have no choice but to acknowledge her. If she could grow that small sale into something bigger, then next year the entire village would bow to her greatness. But Moria knew that growing her reputation would take more than just magic. It would take trickery, and more than a little deception. Determined to reinvent herself, Moria began working tirelessly. She knew she needed to make her pumpkins irresistible, something that even clever couldn't compete with. Using dark magic and forbidden spells, she started to cultivate a new breed of pumpkins that could change color, glow faintly at night, and even hum sweet melodies when the wind blew through their vines. But that wasn't all. Moria knew that appearances alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to ensure that the villagers wouldn't dare buy from anyone else, especially clever. So, she concocted a new potion, one that would subtly enchant anyone who touched her pumpkins, filling them with an uncontrollable desire to buy more. The villagers wouldn't even realize they were under her spell. "I'll sell them one pumpkin, then two, then a whole cartload," Moria whispered to herself, a wicked smile spreading across her face. "And soon, they'll be so enchanted they won't be able to stop." Daniel Thorne watched from the shadows, his eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and doubt. "You think that's going to work? What if they catch on?" "They won't," Moria snapped. "And even if they do, it'll be too late. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll already be under my spell." With newfound confidence, Moria transformed herself. She donned a cloak adorned with vines and pumpkins, her once radiant hair now styled to resemble curling pumpkin vines. She had become the Pumpkin Witch, a title she was ready to impose upon the village. The annual pumpkin contest was approaching, and Moria was more prepared than ever. Her enchanted pumpkins shimmered in the morning light as she loaded them into her cart, each one more magical and deceptive than the last. The contest, now bigger than ever, was the perfect stage for her transformation. This time, she would win not through sheer effort or charm, but through trickery and deceit. The villagers arrived at the market with excitement, eager to see what new wonders the contest would bring. Clever, as usual, had prepared a stunning array of pumpkins, traditional, colorful, and full of the same natural charm that had won the villagers over year after year. But Moria was confident that her enchanted pumpkins would finally outshine him. As she set up her stall, Moria whispered a quiet spell over the pumpkins, ensuring that anyone who touched them would be bewitched. The first villager approached, drawn in by the glowing, humming pumpkins. "These are beautiful," the villager exclaimed, reaching out to pick one up. As soon as their fingers brushed the surface, a glazed look passed over their face. They reached for another pumpkin, and then another, their eyes wide with fascination. "I'll take 3, they murmured. Moria smirked. "Of course you will." It worked. One by one, more villagers came to her stall, entranced by the pumpkins and their subtle enchantment. Moria's stall began to empty as the enchanted villagers bought more and more, leaving Clevera's stall quieter than it had ever been. Finally, it seemed like Moria's plan was working. But Moria, in her arrogance, hadn't considered the long-term effects of her spell. The pumpkins, while beautiful on the outside, were filled with rot and decay on the inside. Sad products of her rushed magic and dark potions mixed with her precious herbs in the jar. As the villagers brought their pumpkins home, they began to notice the strange humming growing louder, the colors flickering unnaturally, and the smell of rot creeping into the air. One villager returned to the market in a panic, holding a pumpkin that had begun to wither and collapse in their hands. "What's wrong with these pumpkins?" they demanded. "They looked perfect when I bought them." Soon, more villagers followed, each with a similar complaint. The pumpkins that had seemed so magical were now revealing their true nature, and the spell Moria had cast over them was breaking. The villagers, no longer entranced, began to see her pumpkins for what they really were. Hollow, rotting husks filled with trickery. Clever, noticing the growing unrest, stepped forward with his usual calm demeanor. "It seems there's been a mistake," he said gently, offering his own pumpkins as replacements. His kind gesture quickly won the villagers back, and once again, his honesty and genuine charm outshone Moria's deceit. Moria, watching from the shadows, felt the anger rise within her. She had come close, so close to finally winning. But once again, her own trickery had backfired. The villagers, now wary of her, avoided her stall entirely, whispering among themselves about the pumpkin witch and her cursed wares. By the end of the day, Moria's stall was empty not because she had sold out, but because the villagers had returned every pumpkin they had bought. Her enchanted pumpkins sat rotting in the back of her cart, their magic fading with each passing hour. Daniel Thorne, ever the observer, sauntered over with a knowing smirk. "Well, that didn't go quite as planned, did it?" "Shut up," Moria hissed, her face twisted with frustration. "You had them, Moria. You almost had the whole village under your spell. But you got greedy," Daniel Thorne said, flicking his tail lazily. "You always get greedy." Moria clenched her fists, glaring at the cart full of rotting pumpkins. She had transformed into the pumpkin witch briefly, and yet she was no closer to victory than before. The villagers, now suspicious of her tricks, would be even harder to deceive next year. As the market emptied and Clever packed up his stall, having once again won the contest and the hearts of the villagers, Moria stood in the shadows, plotting her next move. She refused to accept defeat. Next year, she would be back, stronger, craftier, and more determined than ever. "Next year," she muttered under her breath, her eyes gleaming with dark ambition. "Next year, they'll have no choice but to buy from me." But deep down, Moria knew that her greed and trickery would continue to be her downfall, no matter how powerful she became. And as she left the market that night, her reputation grew darker, her name whispered with fear and distrust among the villagers. But it takes true ambition and dedication to become something far greater, like the pumpkin witch that she was unwilling to give.